I never thought I'd be the guy lying on a downtown sidewalk at 2 in the morning, blood pooling under my head, watching a paramedic literally take a step back when he saw me. But there I was, 48 years old, looking like hell warmed over, and listening to this kid in an EMT uniform tell his partner he wasn't going to touch me because I looked diseased. The whole thing started when I decided to walk home from Murphy's Tavern instead of calling an Uber. Yeah, I know. Brilliant decision after 3 beers and a shot of whiskey. But hell, it was only 6 blocks, and the October air felt good after being cooped up in that stuffy bar all evening. I'd been drowning my sorrows again, something I'd been doing way too much since Janet passed last spring. 43 years of marriage, and then cancer took her in 8 weeks flat, left me rattling around in our house like a marble in a coffee can. I was cutting through the alley behind the old Woolworth building when 3 punks decided I looked like an easy mark. They weren't wrong, honestly. I'd let myself go since Janet died. Hadn't been eating right, hadn't been sleeping right, and my arthritis from an old shrapnel wound in Afghanistan was acting up something fierce. Made me move like I was 90 instead of pushing 50. "Hey, old man," the tallest one called out, blocking my path. "You got any money on you?" I stopped and took a good look at them. Couldn't have been more than 18, 19 years old. Probably good kids who'd made some bad choices. "Look, boys," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. "I don't want any trouble. I've got about $20 in my wallet. You can have it if that's what you need." The leader laughed. And that's when I knew they weren't just looking for money. They wanted to hurt somebody, and I was convenient. $20? Man, you look like you got more than that. Nice watch, decent jacket. Strip it off. Now, I've been in worse spots, way worse. But that was 25 years ago when I had 2 good knees and reflexes that hadn't been dulled by grief and too much bourbon. These kids saw an easy target, and honestly, that's what I was. I handed over my wallet without a fight. Took off my watch, the one Janet bought me for our 20th anniversary, and gave them that too. "There," I said, "that's everything of value I've got." But the shortest one, he had mean eyes, the kind of eyes that said he enjoyed other people's pain. He walked up close enough that I could smell the weed on his breath, and he smiled. "You know what, old man? I don't like your attitude." That's when he shoved me hard. With my bad knee, I went down like a sack of rocks, and my head bounced off the brick wall behind me. I felt the warm trickle of blood immediately, and when I tried to get up, the world started spinning like a carnival ride. The kids grabbed my jacket and took off running, leaving me sprawled in the alley with what I was pretty sure was a concussion and a gash on the back of my skull that was bleeding pretty good. I managed to fish my phone out of my pants pocket, thank God they hadn't thought to take that, and called 911. "911, what's your emergency?" "This is Robert Henley," I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though I was seeing double. "I've been mugged in the alley behind 412 Main Street. I think I need medical attention. Possible head injury." "Are you conscious and breathing, sir?" "Yeah, I'm conscious. Breathing fine. But I'm bleeding from my head, and I'm pretty dizzy. We're sending an ambulance and police units to your location. Stay on the line with me, okay?" I spent the next 8 minutes sitting against that brick wall, talking to a very patient dispatcher named Linda who kept me conscious by asking me questions about my name, the date, and where I lived. Smart woman. She knew the signs of a serious head injury as well as any medic. When the ambulance finally showed up, I heard the sirens and saw the red and blue lights painting the alley walls like some kind of twisted disco. 2 paramedics came jogging toward me, one older guy who looked like he'd been doing this job for a while, and a younger one who couldn't have been more than 25. The older one, his name tag said Peterson, knelt down next to me and started doing the preliminary checks. "Sir, I'm Tom Peterson with Metro EMS. Can you tell me what happened here?" I gave him the short version while he checked my pupils with a pen light and examined the wound on my head. Professional, competent, asking all the right questions. But then he had to step away to get something from the ambulance, and that left me with his partner. The kid's name tag said Martinez, and the minute Peterson walked away, everything changed. Martinez took one look at me and wrinkled his nose like he'd smelled something rotten. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, loud enough for me to hear. "Look at this guy." I'll admit, I wasn't looking my best. I hadn't shaved in 3 days, my clothes were rumpled, and I probably smelled like the inside of Murphy's Tavern. Since Janet died, personal hygiene hadn't been my top priority. But I wasn't what you'd call dirty, just unkempt. Martinez pulled on a second pair of gloves and took a step back. "Hey, Peterson," he called out. "You might want to see this." Peterson came back carrying a medical bag. "What's the problem?" "Look at this guy," Martinez said again, pointing at me like I was some kind of specimen. "Look at his skin. Those marks on his arms. This guy's probably got hepatitis, maybe HIV. Could be anything." I looked down at my arms, confused. The only marks I had were some old scars from a roadside bomb in Kabul back in '99. Shrapnel had torn up my left arm pretty good, but the docs at Walter Reed had patched me up fine. The scars were old and clean, just discolored skin. "Those are old surgical scars," I said, my voice getting a little harder. "From the Army?" Martinez laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Yeah, right. Army. Let me guess. Vietnam? Every homeless guy I pick up claims he was in the military." "I'm not homeless," I said. "And those scars are from Afghanistan, not Vietnam." But Martinez wasn't listening. He was too busy talking to Peterson like I wasn't even there. "I'm not touching this guy without a full hazmat setup. Look at him. When's the last time you think he had a shower? Those could be needle tracks for all we know." Peterson frowned and knelt down to take a closer look at my arms. "These look like surgical scars to me, Martinez. Old ones." "I don't care what they look like," Martinez said. "I'm not risking my health for some junkie who got rolled in an alley. Let the hospital deal with him." That's when something inside me snapped. I'd been dealing with a lot of crap since Janet died. People treating me differently because I looked rough, because I wasn't taking care of myself the way she used to make sure I did. But this was different. This was a medical professional refusing to do his job because he'd decided I was somehow diseased or dangerous based on nothing but my appearance. "Listen here, son," I said, and my voice had that edge that used to make young soldiers straighten up. "I am a United States Army veteran with 22 years of service. I have a master's degree in biomedical engineering from MIT, and I've saved more lives than you'll probably see in your entire career. Those scars on my arm are from shrapnel, not needle tracks, and if you're going to refuse to treat a patient based on how they look, maybe you're in the wrong line of work." Martinez just rolled his eyes. "Yeah, okay. Whatever you say, pal. Peterson, I'm serious about the hazmat gear. This guy's a walking health hazard." Peterson looked uncomfortable. He was clearly torn between doing his job and backing up his partner. "Martinez, the man needs medical attention. He's got a head wound that needs to be cleaned and probably stitched." "Then you treat him," Martinez said. "I'm not getting near him without full protection." So that's how I ended up getting loaded into the back of an ambulance with only one paramedic willing to actually touch me. Peterson did his best, but he kept glancing at Martinez, who had positioned himself as far away from me as possible and was making a big show of sanitizing everything he'd come close to touching. The ride to Metro General took about 10 minutes, and during that time, I had to listen to Martinez radio ahead to the hospital about the high-risk patient they were bringing in. He used terms like possible infectious disease and unknown substance use history and recommend full precautions. By the time we pulled up to the emergency entrance, I felt like a leper. They wheeled me into the ER, and I could see the staff had been prepped by Martinez's radio call. Everyone was wearing extra gloves, face shields, the works. A young doctor came over to examine me, and I could see him trying to maintain his professionalism while clearly being cautious about getting too close. "Mr. Henley, I'm Dr. Rodriguez. I understand you were assaulted and have a head injury. Can you tell me if you've been using any substances tonight?" "3 beers and a shot of whiskey," I said honestly. "Nothing else." "Any history of intravenous drug use?" "None whatsoever." "Any history of infectious diseases? Hepatitis, HIV, anything like that?" "No, doctor. I'm diabetic. I have arthritis, and I've got some PTSD from my time in Afghanistan. That's it, doctor." Rodriguez nodded and started his examination. He was professional, thorough, and didn't seem to share Martinez's concerns about my supposed disease. But I could see Martinez standing in the background, talking to some of the nurses, pointing at me and shaking his head. After about an hour of tests, x-rays, and getting my head wound cleaned and stitched up, Dr. Rodriguez came back with the results. "Good news, Mr. Henley. No concussion, just a nasty cut that required 8 stitches. Your blood work came back completely normal. No signs of infection, disease, or substance abuse beyond the alcohol you mentioned. You're free to go once we finish the paperwork." I should have felt relieved, but mostly I just felt angry. Angry at Martinez for treating me like garbage based on nothing but my appearance. As I was waiting for my discharge papers, I heard Martinez talking to another EMT. "Yeah, we picked up this guy in an alley. Total junkie. Tried to tell me he was some kind of army engineer or something. These homeless vets are all the same. They make up elaborate stories." That's when I decided I'd had enough. I walked over to where Martinez was standing and tapped him on the shoulder. "Excuse me, son. I couldn't help but overhear you talking about me." Martinez turned around and his face immediately took on that same disgusted expression. "Look, man, I don't know what you want, but I want you to listen," I said, cutting him off. "Because I'm only going to say this once. My name is Robert James Henley. I served 22 years in the United States Army, retiring as a lieutenant colonel in 2003. I have a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star with V device, and 3 Army Commendation Medals. After I retired, I used my GI Bill to get a master's degree in biomedical engineering from MIT. Martinez was starting to look uncomfortable, but he still had that smirk on his face. "Okay, sure. Whatever you say?" "I worked for Medtronic for 15 years, I continued, specializing in emergency medical equipment. In fact, I was part of the team that developed the portable defibrillator system that's currently mounted in your ambulance. Model MD-2400. For a split second, I was back in the Medtronic lab in 2008, hunched over prototypes with my team, running simulation after simulation. "We need it smaller," I'd told them. "Field medics in Afghanistan are carrying 60 pounds of gear already. Every ounce matters when you're running toward gunfire." We'd tested those units in mock combat scenarios, simulating dust storms and blood-slicked hands, because I knew what it was like when seconds meant everything. I also helped design the automated blood pressure cuff and the digital thermometer array that you use on every call. The smirk was starting to fade from Martinez's face. That's a pretty specific story." "It's not a story, son. It's the truth. And here's another truth for you. Every piece of equipment in that ambulance has a serial number and a development history. The defibrillator system I helped design, it saved over 200,000 lives in the past 8 years. The blood pressure cuff, that's prevented countless misdiagnoses. The thermometer array, that's caught life-threatening fevers in patients whose families thought they just had the flu." By now, Martinez was looking genuinely uncomfortable, and I noticed that Dr. Rodriguez and a couple of nurses had stopped what they were doing to listen. But I wasn't done yet. Every single piece of that equipment bears the patent signature of Robert J. Henley, and every single piece of that equipment was designed by a man who understood that in emergency medicine, you don't get to choose your patients based on how they look, how they smell, or what you assume about their lifestyle. You treat everyone like their life matters because it does. Martinez opened his mouth to say something, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. You see, son, when I was developing that equipment, I spent hundreds of hours riding along with EMS crews. I've seen paramedics treat everyone from CEOs having heart attacks to gang members with gunshot wounds with the same level of professionalism and care. That's what the job requires. That's what being a medical professional means. I paused to let that sink in, then continued. Tonight, you violated the most basic principle of emergency medicine. You let your personal prejudices affect your treatment of a patient. You made assumptions about my health status based on my appearance, and you potentially put my life at risk by refusing to provide appropriate care. The silence in the ER was deafening. I could see Dr. Rodriguez looking between me and Martinez with a very serious expression on his face. Peterson, who had been standing quietly nearby, was staring at his partner like he'd never seen him before. "Now," I said, my voice getting quieter but more intense, "you can choose to believe me or not, but I suggest you go out to your ambulance and take a look at the manufacturer's plate on that defibrillator. It'll say Medtronic MD 2400, lead engineer R.J. Henley, patent number 8374629. Then you can decide whether you want to apologize for treating the man who helped design your life-saving equipment like he was some kind of infectious disease." Martinez looked like he'd been punched in the gut. I didn't... Look, man, I was just being careful. You can't be too safe in this job." "Being careful is one thing," I said. "Being prejudiced is another. There's a difference between taking appropriate precautions and refusing to treat a patient because you've decided they're beneath you." Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward. "Excuse me, Mr. Henley. Did you say you were the lead engineer on the MD 2400 defibrillator system?" "That's correct." Could I ask you a question about it? We've been having some issues with the calibration on one of our units." And that's when everything changed. For the next 20 minutes, I found myself in the middle of an impromptu technical consultation, explaining to Dr. Rodriguez and 3 other medical staff members how to troubleshoot a problem with their defibrillator that had been giving them headaches for weeks. Turned out, it was a simple software glitch that could be fixed with a specific sequence of button presses that wasn't in the manual. During this conversation, Martinez had slipped away, presumably to check the manufacturer's plate on his ambulance equipment. When he came back, his face was white as a sheet. "Dr. Rodriguez," he said quietly, "could I speak with you privately?" They stepped away for a few minutes, and I could see Martinez talking rapidly while Dr. Rodriguez nodded grimly. When they came back, Dr. Rodriguez looked like he was barely containing his anger. "Mr. Henley," he said, "I want to apologize on behalf of Metro General for the treatment you received from our EMS crew tonight. This is absolutely unacceptable, and I assure you it will be addressed." Martinez stepped forward, and I could see he was shaking slightly. "Mr. Henley, sir, I need to apologize. I was completely out of line tonight. I made assumptions about you that were wrong and unprofessional. I violated my oath as a medical professional, and I put a patient at risk because of my own prejudices." He paused, clearly struggling with his words. "I checked the equipment in our ambulance. Everything you said is true. The defibrillator, the blood pressure cuff, the thermometer array, they all have your name on the patents. I've been using equipment you designed to save lives for the past 2 years, and tonight I treated you like garbage," I finished for him. "Yeah, I noticed." "I don't have any excuse," Martinez said. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I know that doesn't make up for what I did, but I wanted you to know that I understand how badly I screwed up." I looked at this young man, this kid who was probably the same age my son would have been if Janet and I had been able to have children, and I saw something I recognized. I saw someone who had made a mistake and was genuinely horrified by it. Someone who was learning, possibly for the first time, that his actions had consequences beyond what he'd imagined. "Martinez," I said, "what's your first name?" "David, sir." "David, let me tell you something. I've been in situations where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. I've made mistakes that cost people. The difference between a good medic and a bad one isn't whether you make mistakes, it's whether you learn from them." I could see he was listening intently, so I continued. Tonight, you learned something important about yourself. You learned that you have prejudices that can affect your ability to do your job. The question now is what you're going to do with that knowledge. I want to be better, he said. I want to be the kind of paramedic who treats every patient with respect, regardless of how they look or what I think I know about them. Good, I said. That's a start. Dr. Rodriguez cleared his throat. Mr. Henley, I hope you'll consider filing a formal complaint about tonight's incident. What happened to you was unacceptable, and our EMS crews need to be held accountable for their actions. I thought about that for a moment. Part of me wanted to see Martinez get what was coming to him, but another part of me remembered what it was like to be young and stupid and in need of someone to show me a better way. Doctor, I said, I'd like to make a suggestion instead. I'd like to propose that Metro EMS implement some additional training for their crews. Sensitivity training, maybe, but also some education about the diverse backgrounds of the patients they serve. A lot of veterans are struggling these days, and some of us don't look the way people expect veterans to look. That's a very generous suggestion, Dr. Rodriguez said. I'd also like to suggest that Martinez here be part of developing that training program. Sometimes the best teachers are people who've learned hard lessons about their own mistakes. Martinez looked stunned. You'd trust me to help with something like that? I'd trust you to learn from tonight, I said. Whether you do or not is up to you. Over the next few weeks, something remarkable happened. Dr. Rodriguez reached out to me and asked if I'd be willing to consult on the training program we'd discussed. Metro EMS was apparently very interested in addressing the issues that had come to light that night, and they wanted to do it right. I agreed, partly because I thought it was important, and partly because it gave me something to focus on other than rattling around my empty house. Working on the training program reminded me why I'd gotten into biomedical engineering in the first place, to help save lives. Martinez, to his credit, threw himself into the project. He interviewed dozens of veterans, homeless individuals, and other marginalized populations about their experiences with emergency medical services. He researched best practices for treating patients with dignity regardless of their circumstances. He even reached out to veteran support organizations to better understand the challenges facing former military personnel. The training program we developed together ended up being adopted not just by Metro EMS, but by emergency services departments across 3 states. It covered everything from recognizing the signs of PTSD to understanding why a homeless veteran might be distrustful of authority figures. But mostly, it focused on the fundamental principle that every patient deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. 6 months after that night in the alley, I got a call from Martinez. "Mr. Henley," he said, "I wanted to let you know that I used your defibrillator design to save a life yesterday. A homeless veteran having a heart attack outside the bus station. When I first saw him, my old instincts kicked in. He looked rough, smelled bad, and I found myself hesitating." "But you didn't hesitate," I said. "No, sir, I didn't. I remembered that night in the ER, and I remembered what you taught me about treating every patient like their life matters. I treated him exactly the way I would have treated anyone else. The defibrillator worked perfectly, by the way. The man made a full recovery." "That's good to hear, David." "There's something else," he said. "The veteran I treated? His name was Charles Morrison. Turns out he was a medic in Vietnam, saved dozens of lives in combat. If I had let my prejudices guide my treatment of him, we would have lost a genuine American hero." After I hung up the phone, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about that night in the alley and everything that had followed. I thought about Janet and how proud she would have been of the training program. I thought about the equipment I'd designed and how it was still out there saving lives every day. I thought about Martinez and how a young man's willingness to confront his own prejudices had led to something bigger than either of us had imagined. But mostly, I thought about Charles Morrison, a homeless veteran whose life had been saved by equipment I'd designed, operated by a paramedic I'd helped train to see past appearances to the human being underneath. It was a perfect circle in a way, the kind of story Janet would have called meant to be. 3 months later, I got another call, this one from the mayor's office. They wanted to know if I'd be interested in serving on a task force to address veteran homelessness in our city. They'd heard about the work I'd done with Metro EMS and thought I might have some valuable insights. I said yes, of course. It felt good to have a purpose again, to be working on problems that mattered, and it felt especially good to know that the night I'd been treated like a diseased vagrant had led to changes that were helping other veterans get the respect and care they deserved. The task force work led to consulting opportunities with other cities, which led to speaking engagements at medical conferences, which led to a part-time teaching position at the local community college, training the next generation of emergency medical technicians. 2 years after that night in the alley, I was teaching future paramedics at the local community college. David Martinez sat in the back row, now working toward becoming a certified instructor himself. The most important piece of equipment you'll carry, I told the class, isn't your defibrillator or your medical bag. It's your ability to see every patient as a human being worthy of your best effort. After class, Martinez caught up with me. "You know," he said, "I never thanked you properly for giving me a second chance instead of ruining my career." "Everyone deserves a second chance," I said. "Making a mistake doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human." As I walked home that evening, past the alley where it all started, I thought about Janet and how proud she would have been. I thought about all the veterans getting better care because a young paramedic learned to see past his prejudices. I thought about all the lives saved by equipment I'd designed, operated by professionals trained to treat every patient with dignity. The scars on my arm still told the story of that roadside bomb in Afghanistan. But now they also told the story of a night when prejudice and compassion collided, and compassion won. They told the story of what happens when we choose to build bridges instead of walls, to teach instead of punish. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the seeds of the best things we ever do. Sometimes getting knocked down is just the first step toward standing up straighter than you ever have before.